please allow me to introduce Tanita Allen, who is our keynote speaker this morning. She has a book that we have really enjoyed this year. Our theme is storytelling. You all have stories. She has a story, and we are grateful that you are here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Tanita, and I'm living with Huntington's disease. I was diagnosed in 2012, and I'm the first person in my family to receive this diagnosis. But before I was diagnosed, I was told something that stayed with me. Black people don't get Huntington's disease. I heard this not once, not twice, but from several medical professionals. And for a long time, I believed it. Why? Because I didn't see people who looked like me in pamphlets or websites or even conferences. But I now know that this is a dangerous myth. The largest population of people living with HD is in Venezuela, and many of them are people of color. In Western Venezuela, around Lake Maracaibo in the Zula state, lives one of the most concentrated populations of people affected by Huntington's disease in the world. Their participation in research has changed the course of HD history. So starting in 1979, Dr. Nancy Wexler and a team of international scientists began working with families in this region. And with their trust and involvement, researchers were able to identify that the HD gene in 1993, paving the way for genetic testing, predictive counseling, and ongoing research into genetic modifiers. The Venezuelan families are not just research participants. They are trailblazers. Their courage and collaboration has helped shape the entire landscape of HD research, diagnosis, and care. Every advancement we celebrate today has roots in their sacrifice and resilience. So let's honor their legacy by continuing to advocate, provide compassionate care, support research that brings us closer to a cure. Together, we stand on shoulders of a community that changed everything, a community of color. So today, I stand before you to say, HD has color, we exist, and we deserve to be seen. And now I'd like to bring this closer to home and share a bit about my own story. I grew up in a middle-class family in Cleveland. I am the middle child of 3 kids. I was that kid in the schoolyard that stood up to the bully. You know, I was the one that would fight the school bully. My parents, they've been married for over 50 years, 51 this year, and their love and commitment set the foundation for who I am today. I grew up in Catholic schools, and that most of my education took place in a Catholic school setting where I studied and I learned structure, discipline, and an importance of community. We raised Siberian Huskies when I was little, and my favorite dog was King. He's my childhood companion who lived to be 13 years old. He was strong, loyal, and full of personality, just like I hoped to be. I was and still am a lover of animals. And I am a huge reader, and I was always a reader as a child. I was curious about everything, science, art, history, you name it. For a while, I even dreamed of being a fashion designer one day. And then I considered business and eventually paralegal studies. And to this day, I still love fashion, and I'm endlessly curious about the law, and now I found my calling in health and wellness. In my career, I wore many hats. I worked in marketing as a sales rep on the East Coast, which is where I first became familiar with North Carolina. I was actually here in North Carolina back in 2003. That's the last time I've been here, so it's nice to be here and be back. And I moved to New York, and I met a guy, and we were engaged, and we hit it off. I was living in New York City, fell in love, and thought this was my forever person. And at that time, it felt like everything was falling into place, great relationship, incredible city, a chance to start fresh from a small town. And, but our romance fizzled. And we remain close friends, though. And to this day, we still text each other. After that, I carved out a life of my own, living in a cozy apartment in Washington Heights on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I had a strong job. I had an interesting job for the government as a paralegal, working for the federal courts. And I worked for both courts. I worked for the Second Circuit, and I worked for the Southern District. And that role really shaped and helped me as far as like being resourceful, learning how to be resourceful, learning how to look up things, learning how to, really stay focused on tasks. I saw my path clearly. Law school was going to be eventually my path. That's what I thought. Who knows, maybe even a judge someday. That's how I thought at that time. And I was driven, focused, and determined. I traveled and spent time with friends and family, explored museums, bookstores. My life was full. And then in 2010, everything changed. It started subtly. My toes began to wiggle on their own. And I just thought it was some sort of muscle spasm. Maybe I have some, problem with my feet or whatever. This is what I was thinking. And I showed it to my doctor, and my doctor was like, "Are you doing that on your own?" And I said, no, not doing it on my own. I just don't know. Maybe it's just, I don't know what this is. And he said, well, whatever this is neurological and definitely something in the brain. And you need to see a neurologist. And that was my first introduction to a neurologist at that time. And I had never, at that point, needed a neurologist, so I didn't know. And but I didn't realize that this moment, this simple, unexpected movement of my toes was the start of a new chapter, one filled with questions, misdiagnoses, and a 2-year journey towards answers. I had no idea that this was the early sign of something that would shape my entire life, Huntington's disease. So the movement spread from my toes to my fingers, face, torso, arms, legs, and even my vocal cords. I actually was misdiagnosed one time, many times, in the ER as having Tourette's because my grunting noises were really bad. I struggled with depression, anxiety. I had cognitive fog, and I felt like I was losing myself one thought at a time. Slowly, these small shifts started taking things away from me, things I used to do without even thinking. Things like walking, taking a shower, sitting still became difficult for me. And I used to go out with my friends all the time. Dinners in the city, concerts, spontaneous outings. I loved getting dressed up, doing my hair, walking into a room with confidence. But when the involuntary movements became more prominent, I was very self-conscious and afraid. I can recall a time where, of many, where I would go on a subway in New York and people would literally get so freaked out by all the movements that I had that they would get up and they would change their seats or they would pull their children closer to them because they were afraid of me. People were scared of me, and I was scared that they were scared because I had no answers at this point. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew something was wrong. So people would glance at me and they'd whisper and get uncomfortable and change their seat. I was really afraid. I was terrified. My body felt like it had turned against me. I wasn't in control anymore. And the world around me seemed to respond with fear instead of compassion. I used to take long walks through the city, just to think, unwind, or enjoy a sunny day, but soon walking became a risk. I started to stumble more, my balance was off, I had lots of falls. The very act of walking down a sidewalk, because you never knew if it was gonna be like an even pavement, became a battle, because sometimes I would trip over curbs and sidewalks. I began avoiding social gatherings, not because I didn't want to connect, but because I was afraid of being stared at or people asking a lot of questions, thinking that, what's wrong with you? And I was afraid somebody would ask, what's wrong with you? And I wouldn't know what to say. And then there was the emergency room visits. At my lowest, when the symptoms became too much to handle, I turned to the healthcare system expecting hope for answers. But instead, I was treated like a criminal. The questions were aggressive, cold, and full of judgment. What drugs did you take? How much have you been drinking? Are you detoxing? I wasn't on anything. I wasn't high, I wasn't drunk. And when my blood and urine tests came back clean, they didn't try to understand me. They just switched lanes. Well, maybe you're mentally ill. Maybe you're unstable. I was even accused of being a victim of probably domestic violence because they thought that I was probably traumatized at home and coming into the ER, and I didn't want to tell them. They tried to make me admit that I was a victim of domestic violence. I even had one doctor ask me, are you being abused at home? That's what I said, yeah, and because of the bruises from the falls, that's what he concluded. The worst part was not the movement, it was the isolation and shame, an invisible wall between me and the rest of the world. I felt alone, dismissed, misunderstood, and I still had no name for what was happening to me. But every time I reached out for help, I was met with skepticism and medical gaslighting. I was told, oh, it's just anxiety. You're too young. It's probably psychological. You're probably a victim of domestic violence. You're in denial. You know you're on drugs and alcohol. You're probably suffering from HIV/AIDS. That's another thing, because this is very typical with Black women. You probably have lupus because you are Black. And one thing we know for sure that you don't have is Huntington's, because Black people don't get Huntington's. I wish I could tell you that once I started seeing doctors, I quickly got the answers I needed, but that wasn't the case. It was the exact opposite. Appointment after appointment, I left feeling more confused and dismissed and more broken. Doctors would throw out all kinds of diagnoses, none of them fitting, none of them accurate. Some of them thought it might be MS. Others said it was conversion disorder. And a few just chalked it up to stress or anxiety. But here's the part that still haunts me. When Huntington's disease did come up, it was quickly dismissed, not because my symptoms didn't match, but because I'm Black. One doctor finally ordered a DNA test for Huntington's after seeing my symptoms. I gave a blood sample and walked away, anxiously waiting, hoping I'd finally get to closer to an answer. But actually, that same day, I got a call from the doctor, and she told me that the test had to be canceled. And the test was canceled because her boss said that it was impossible for people of color or Black people to have Huntington's disease, so the test was irrelevant and it was not necessary. And so she had to cancel the test because she had to listen to her boss. And she told me that she understood if I went and continued the journey to find somebody that would test me. So I went online and I searched day and night for specialists. It took me another 7 months later, but after reading articles, message boards, journals, anything that might point me to someone who could take me seriously, I made calls and I chased hope. For 7 more months, I kept pushing until I finally found a doctor who agreed to test me. And this doctor was like a very unconventional doctor, very, very New York, very quick-witted. He was just, he's just quite a character. And he was just like, you know what? I don't care what those doctors said about you. You're in my house now. This is my domain. And I'm going to treat you according to what I think you need, and I'm not going to go by what my colleagues have said, because he knew many of the people that I had seen at that point. When that second DNA test came back positive for Huntington's disease, I freaked out. I was like, the wind was knocked out of me. How could all of these professionals, people with years of training, how could they have been so wrong? How could they all think that people like me don't get Huntington's disease? The doctor told me, I believe this result is accurate, but part of me still couldn't believe it. So we ran a third DNA test, this time from a different lab. And when that test came back positive, I had to accept the reality that it was real. I had Huntington's disease. It was a moment of grief, of truth, and of validation. And strangely, it was also the beginning of healing, because now I had a name, a diagnosis, something concrete to fight. I started to build a support network brick by brick. I connected with HD organizations, joined support groups, talked to others who had walked a similar path. I leaned on family, I found my voice, and eventually found my purpose. I share this journey, this part of my journey, not to dwell on the pain, but to show that advocacy starts with refusing to disappear. When the system told me this doesn't happen to people like you, I chose to be louder. I chose to take up space. And now I'm here, just as someone living with Huntington's, not just as someone living with Huntington's, but as someone committed to changing the narrative for those who are overlooked, misdiagnosed, and ignored. When I finally got my diagnosis in 2012, I thought I would at least get answers. Instead, I was handed a prediction. The prediction was, by 2024, you'll be in diapers, unable to walk, talk, and most likely in a nursing home. I was devastated. I cried, I grieved the future I thought I was going to have. For a long time, I felt like HD was a death sentence. And the truth is, I spent decades in and out of hospitals. I had hundreds of falls and battled deep depression and despair. I spent from 2010 to present day, still having some balance issues. However, I have not been hospitalized since 2019 for an HD-related symptom. When I fell, I would fall on steps, down the steps, in the bathtub, out of the bed, in the hallways, on the street. But guess what? It's 2025 and I'm still here. I'm walking, talking, and speaking to all of you today. One of the biggest turning points in my journey was bringing the right medical team, what I call the dream team. Because let me tell you, not every provider is the right fit. Some are dismissive. Others didn't understand HD. Some didn't understand me. If doctors take a condescending tone, I would leave. If doctors ignored my concerns, I would leave. So I set a new standard. I need a team that sees me as a whole person and not just a diagnosis. So one of the most important things I've learned on this journey is that you cannot do it alone. Living with Huntington's disease takes a community of support, and I've worked hard to build what I call the dream team. This group of professionals not only understands HD, but also sees me as a whole person and not a diagnosis. An ideal setting would be finding them all under the same medical system. For example, I go to the HD Center of Excellence in Cleveland. Here are some of my little tips about the way I select my dream team. So for my primary care doctor, this might sound simple, but it's everything. When something feels off in my body, whether it's a new ache, a new sudden fatigue, or a shift I can't explain, my primary care doctor takes me seriously. They don't brush it off. They ask questions, they follow up, they make space for me to express what I'm feeling and trust in my voice. And that is a foundation for all of the other doctors that I see at the medical clinic. The next person that I would put in my dream team, if I were, looking to start one, is a neurologist, but it's the one who specializes in movement disorders. Having a movement disorder specialist especially is important because I've noticed that there is a big difference between going to a general neurologist and then one that specializes in movement disorders. They seem to be more, it seems to be more in alignment with Huntington's disease, in my opinion. They track the progression of my symptoms. They keep me informed about treatment options and clinical trials. And most importantly, they understand that HD isn't just a movement disorder. They look at me. They look at as a whole person. The next person on my dream team would be a psychiatrist. That would help with mood and cognition. Mental health is a huge part of HD, and having a psychiatrist who really gets the emotional and cognitive toll of the disease is essential. They work with me to manage anxiety, depression, irritability, mood shifts that come with HD. I also work with them on developing great sleep hygiene, and I can't stress that enough. They don't just medicate, they listen, adjust, and support my emotional well-being with compassion. The next person would be a psychologist. I would have a psychologist on my team. A psychologist to help process trauma and grief. Living with the progressive illness brings loss. Loss of who you were, loss of what you thought your life would look like, and how the world responds to you. That does take a toll. At least for me, I need a psychologist also that I can check in with on a regular basis. My psychologist helps me process that grief, understand the trauma that I faced, both in the medical system, and help me rebuild my identity with strength and intention. Our sessions help me stay emotionally grounded and hopeful. The next person that I would have on my team is a speech therapist, and an HD speech therapist to help with swallowing and communication. And as HD affects the muscles in your face, throat, and voice, a skilled speech therapist becomes critical. They help me strengthen my swallowing muscles to reduce choking risks and work on strategies to help keep my speech clear. It's not about the mechanics, it's about preserving my ability to connect, express, and be heard. The next person I would have is a physical therapist. My physical therapist helps me literally stay on my feet. They work with me to maintain strength, improve coordination, and reduce falls. There was a time that I had a walker, there was a time that I had a cane, and I used it every single day, all day. And now I don't have a cane, and now I don't have a walker, and I am so grateful for that because of physical therapy. The next person that I would have on my dream team is a dietitian. And a dietitian who understands the brain-body connection. Nutrition matters more than people think. A dietitian who knows how to fuel the brain and maintain muscle mass and support energy levels makes a huge difference. They help me craft a plan that fits my life, supports my health, and keeps me feeling as strong as possible. So this was important because I got a lot of good tips and tricks on recipes that I could tweak and make more healthy, or make things like salmon, for example, for omega-3s, and just really and being creative and fun in the kitchen, and learning. It can be a fun thing if you make it a fun thing. I make it a fun thing. I like to get in the kitchen and come up with some really cool recipes, smoothie recipes, because usually I have a healthy morning protein smoothie, but it's fun to play around with it. So yeah. I look for compassion and competence in all of these people. And I ask hard questions. I come with questions. I wasn't afraid to walk away when I wasn't taken seriously. So let me say this to you clearly. If you feel ignored, overlooked, or disrespected, leave. You deserve better. For a long time, I didn't realize how powerful my voice was. Navigating Huntington's disease can often feel like the world is happening to you, but self-advocacy is the process of reclaiming your place at the center of your story. It's not always easy, and it doesn't always look perfect, but every effort counts. Here are a few tools that help me reclaim my power one step at a time. Keep records, journals, symptom trackers, and appointment notes. I can't emphasize this enough. Documentation is everything. I keep a running journal, pen to paper, and I actually do like an app of tracking my symptoms or medication reminders, appointments, anything relating to my symptoms. I document so that when I go to the doctor's appointments, I'm not drawing a blank and getting confused or maybe have, get off topic from why I'm there, because I want to definitely be respectful of their time, and I want to make sure that I get the most out of my appointment. Know your rights, especially around disability accommodations. Whether you're in school, at work, or navigating public spaces, know your legal rights is a form of protection and empowerment. It took me a while to realize that I didn't have to ask permission to have needs. I just had to know that I was entitled to it. Registering with disability services, asking for reasonable accommodations is an example. I go to school and I ask for accommodations, and they give them to me. Or simply requesting extra time during appointments are a way of saying I matter and my health matters. The next thing I would say is use technology, apps like MediSafe, MyChart, and wellness trackers. Technology has become a quiet but essential part of my care team. I use MyCharts to help me manage my appointments and schedules and keep up with my doctors. I do wellness tracking apps. I have a little app on my watch where I do my steps. I keep up with my steps every day. And it's just like a little fun thing, for me, it's a little fun thing to keep up with like my steps. They help keep me accountable, but more importantly, they help me understand my own body better. The next thing is building community. Online HD groups, wellness networks, faith-based spaces are always important. No one should have to walk this journey alone. Community has saved me more times than I can count. I've learned that being vulnerable with others can lead to real strength. Faith-based spaces also offered me spiritual grounding and a sense of belonging. There is no one right way or wrong way to do this. And I would practice assertiveness. Say no without guilt, say yes with joy. This was one of the hardest lessons for me. At first, I felt selfish setting boundaries, but I learned that no is a full sentence. And every time I honor my limits, I honor my health. On the flip side, I also give myself permission to say yes to joy, to community, to opportunities that light me up, even if they scare me a little bit, like being in front of you guys. Assertiveness is not aggression, it's self-respect. Setting boundaries is hard, especially when you're someone who's used to showing up for others, being strong, or being the go-to person. Honestly, it took me a long time to realize that even I needed boundaries. Getting some time to be alone, to figure things out, is definitely helpful. For me, it wasn't just one big moment, it was a buildup of small ones. Times when I felt conversations were draining, times when I ignored how I was feeling just to keep the peace, times when people minimized what I was going through or made me feel like I had to explain or justify my Huntington's diagnosis. I started noticing that certain relationships made my symptoms worse, like literally more chorea, more anxiety, more exhaustion, and that was my wake-up call. And I realized your energy is precious, especially when you're living with a chronic illness. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away, they're about protecting your peace. It's saying, this is what I need to be okay, and I still love you, but this is my limit. Was it difficult? Absolutely. I felt guilty. I was worried about that I would be thought of as rude or selfish. Some relationships didn't survive beyond the shift, but the ones that mattered, they grew stronger. And the people who really love me and who really respect my boundaries are the ones I keep around. Now I check in with myself more. I notice when I feel tense or overwhelmed, and is this a boundary issue? That's what I ask myself. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it's limiting how much I share with certain people. And sometimes it's just choosing to rest over obligation. You might be wondering, how are you still functioning? Part of it is good care, but a huge part of it is my daily commitment to wellness. I live mindfully, not perfectly, but intentionally. And I choose what I can control and let go of what I can't. That's not just surviving HD, but that's thriving with it. People often ask me, how are you so open about your diagnosis? I wasn't always. I used to hide my symptoms. I didn't want people to stare. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want the rejection. But keeping HD to myself was isolating. I was walking through life with this invisible storm inside of me, pretending everything was fine on the outside. I smiled when I was breaking. I laughed when I walked to cry or cried. The more I hid, the heavier it became. It was exhausting. I felt alone, like no one could probably understand what I was going through because I wasn't giving them the chance to. Then that started to shift when I began keeping a journal. At first, it was just a private space to let it all out. I wrote about the fear, the frustration, the confusion, the grief. I didn't hold back on the pages. I poured it all out. I was too scared to say it out loud, though. Over time, journaling became a form of therapy for me, a place where I could connect with the truth without judgment. It helped me sense my emotions and reconnect with parts of myself that I had buried under the pain and shame. As I wrote more, something unexpected happened. I began to feel a sense of relief. The act of putting words to my experience or acknowledging my truth began to release some of the weight I had been carrying. And slowly, that relief turned into strength. I realized that my voice mattered. My story mattered. Speaking about HD, first in my journal, then out loud, gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. The more I share, and the less alone I feel. I began to connect with others who were living with HD or other chronic conditions. I started to see that vulnerability could be a bridge, not a weakness. I was no longer defined by my diagnosis. I was reclaiming my narrative. There was a time when HD made me feel ashamed, like I had to hide in the shadows. Now it's part of my story that I share with courage, because in speaking out, I found out that it's not only healing, but it's also providing me a sense of purpose. My voice is not just for me, it's for everyone who's felt like that and who had to suffer in silence. Our stories have power. Power to educate, power to break myths, power to make space for others. So I live out loud now. I write, I speak, I post, I show up. I've learned that one of the most powerful ways to change our future is by getting involved. I've participated in research like HD Enroll. I've worked with advocacy organizations. I've written my legislators to discuss HD and racial equity in healthcare. I advocate with educational institutions like medical schools and the schools of public health to make sure our voices are heard. You can do this too. Share your story. Ask how you can be part of a study. Join an HD walk. Email your representative. Change happens when we show up and speak up. Change also does not always happen overnight. For me, it started quietly with a pen and a journal. I wasn't ready to shout my diagnosis from the rooftops, and that's okay. If you're not ready, that's okay too. But I got ready, and healing and empowerment, there's no timeline for that. And they certainly don't look the same for everyone. So for a while, just simply writing, if that's what you do that. It's definitely a way to process grief and step into your own acceptance. But eventually, I wanted more when I was writing. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to be heard, not just by others, but by myself. So I started finding ways to live more openly. Sometimes that meant wearing a bracelet or a t-shirt that sparked a conversation about Huntington's disease. Sometimes it meant mentioning HD in casual conversation, even if my voice shook a little bit and I was nervous about who I was talking to. Other times it meant participating in community programs like HD Reaches Book Club or joining a virtual video game session where I could connect with others. It wasn't just about grand gestures. It's about small, intentional steps that allowed me to feel more aligned with my truth. And you know what? Sometimes change starts right where you are, within your own home, within your closest friends or family. Maybe it's opening up to someone for the first time. Maybe it's watching an HD documentary together. Maybe it's simply allowing yourself to rest on the hard days without guilt. Those are all powerful acts of change also. What matters most is that you're making the change in your life, at your pace, on your terms. Whether you're journaling in private, showing up in support groups, or just saying, I'm not okay to someone who you trust, it all counts. Every small act of courage builds on the next. Every word you write, speak, or share is a step out of the shadows and into the light. You don't have to be loud to be brave. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to start. And when you do, you might be surprised at how empowered, seen, and supported you began to feel. A neuropsychologist recommended that I enroll in school for my cognitive issues that I had. And I started with one class at a time. I noticed I was improving my cognition by repetitive learning in a structured way. This turned into an associate's degree of science, then a bachelor's degree of public affairs, and now I'm in a master's program studying health and wellness. This is proof that anything is possible. If I can do it, you most certainly can too. Don't wait for the big milestones to cheer you on. Self-advocacy is a journey, not a destination. And every step forward deserves recognition. Get out of bed today, win. Make a healthy choice, win. Ask for help, huge win. You are sitting here today, win. HD is a hard diagnosis, but it is not a death sentence. I know that today. You can grieve, you can rage, but then rise. You are here, you are breathing, and you are so much more than you know, and so much more than the power than you think. We don't just survive with HD, we thrive. We don't fade into the background, we show up and shine. Because HD has color, HD has strength, HD has hope, and I'm living proof. Your voice matters, your needs are valid, and you're powerful. It all starts the moment you decide to use it. Thank you, HD Reach, for this amazing opportunity to speak before this amazing community. Thank you for everyone for sharing this space with me, because representation matters. And I want every person of color with HD to know you're not invisible, you matter, you're not alone. Thank you.